Welcome to the Hero Next Door podcast, where we feature stories of everyday heroes. These are the kind of people who might live next door to you. They become our heroes in this podcast by doing things that show they're caring in the world. I'm Marilyn Fitzpatrick. I'm a psychologist, a professor emerita of counseling psychology at McGill University, and the host of Hero Next Door. Today, our heroes are a father and daughter, Kim and Kayla Reid, who run an organization called On Rock. On Rock is a double reference to the Christian idea of Jesus as the rock, and the fact that their community organization was originally developed for making Christian rock music readily available at affordable prices. But since its inception, On Rock has expanded several times. It's become a youth drop-in center, it's a food bank, it's a subsidized cafe, and a thrift store, all for the community that it serves. Commenting on our heroes, Kim and Kayla Reid, our expert today will be Louise Hayes, who's a clinical psychologist, a speaker, and an author, whose most recent book, What Makes You Stronger, focuses how to thrive in the face of change and uncertainty. So Kim and Kayla, our heroes, faced a great deal of uncertainty, and Louise will help us dive in to understand how they were able to keep changing and evolving in ways that serve their community and make them our heroes for this episode. So let's start with the story of Kim and Kayla Reid and On Rock.
All right, my name is Kim Reid. I am the president of On Rock Community Services. On Rock has been in existence for a very, very long time. Well, On Rock, the name On Rock comes from the fact that I am a follower of Jesus. And in the Bible, Jesus is described as the rock. And when we started in the music business, we were promoting Christian rock bands, bringing them into town and creating festivals and doing all that kind of stuff. And along with that, we started selling Christian music because the Christian music that was for sale here was like ridiculously priced. And we knew what the stores were paying for it. So we asked the store to lower their prices and they said no. And I said, if you don't lower your prices, I'm going to start a music store and I'm going to compete with you. And they said, yeah, that'll never happen. And 2 weeks later, we opened a music store and took a lot of their business away and put music into people's hands for $7 a CD rather than $19.99. So we had that going for a while. And in this whole process, I was also in a band that was attached to On Rock. So the On Rock name came from On Rock, as in built on the rock, which is Jesus, and that's the basis for what we do. And then I was working with juvenile delinquents within the social service system. I was doing that for a long time, and a buddy of mine who ran an organization at the time called Youth for Christ wanted me to open a drop-in center for him, and I just kept saying no because I got a job. But over a short period of time, probably 2 years, I got to the point where I was like, you know what, I'm done here. And a drop-in center would be a really cool thing. And basically the drop-in center, the goal there was to reach kids who might be at risk and get them off the streets before they end up in a system, before they end up doing stupid stuff, because a lot of kids do stupid stuff because they're bored. So we opened an arcade, Greasy Spoon, the music played right into it. We had, that became one of our main venues. We had bands coming in and all of that stuff. And then we realized that we needed to move. Like we couldn't stay where we were. The rent was too high. It was about to be raised again. And so we started looking at buying a building, which we ended up buying up at the top of Pierrefonds. And when we moved into that building, we had planned to do a whole bunch of stuff, but when we got there and saw the place and started really organizing it and making it useful, bringing in pool tables and stuff, there was no room to do concerts, really. So we ended up dropping that whole end of the business and focused on the drop-in center. And we did that for a long time. And a lady came to us at our drop-in center and asked if she could use our place to run her little food bank. And she was 81 years old and she needed a place. We don't do anything in the drop-in center on Mondays. So, and that's when she did food bank. So we said, yeah, come in on Monday. So she came in on Mondays. And then a few months later, she said, could you help on Mondays? So we said, yes, we can help on Mondays. And that's when she started to stop showing up. And that's when we said, okay, I think we run a food bank. And we couldn't see our way to stop feeding the families that we were feeding. And as we started feeding these families and we got into the whole food insecurity business, we realized that there's a lot more people in need in the West Island than we originally thought. So we went about improving our food and improving our delivery system. And as we did that, more and more families were showing up, and it just continues to grow. And we eventually got so big that we moved it over to Ama Bay, which is the poorest postal code in Quebec and one of the poorest in Canada. And so we decided to move here so that we could serve our people better.
My name is Kayla Reid, and I opened a thrift store as a division of On Rock Community Services. We did that when COVID hit. All of the fundraisers that were supposed to be happening, that we do every year to bring money into the food bank, weren't going to be happening anymore because of COVID. So we had, I think, already spoken about a thrift store in the past, and now it just kind of felt like the right time because it was a way for us to keep money going into the food bank while we weren't doing any of our fundraisers. It was kind of a cool project for me because I'm actually graduated in art education and was teaching art up until COVID hit. So I designed the whole store. We spent, I think, like 6 months building the thrift store. But basically we pulled all that together, and it kind of is a bit of a unique store to the West Island. Our thrift stores in the West Island are mostly kind of like bigger boxy stores, like Value Village and stuff, like, which are great and they're super affordable, but they're not like as fun. And so we kind of made a boutique-y thrift store with like kind of a downtown feel in the West Island, in our community, creating affordable clothing for people who need it and kind of a fun place to shop. It's funny. I never intended to leave art education for good. I left and kind of was like, okay, we're going to start this project, but like, eventually I'm going to have to go back to my big girl job. Like I work at a private art school and I teach like almost half the classes there. Like that's what I was doing at the time anyways. And I don't think I expected to like love doing this as much as I did. And when it came time and my boss came back to me and was like, hey, we're opening back to school up again. Like, I need you back. I was like, you know what? I feel really passionate about what I'm doing now. And at the end of the day, community work is in my family and in my blood. And I honestly, it feels like the right place for me. I don't know. I get to go to work every day and we get to feel good about what we're doing, yeah.
Thrift It was doing really well. People were loving it. And in the food bank, we had what we called a diner, which was every Tuesday and Thursday, low-income families could come in for $2 and have a meal, or $5 for a family. As I'm sure people can understand, during the last 2 years of COVID, the numbers in the food bank started to really increase. We went from serving 200 families a week to serving 280 families a week. And so we were looking at our space and going, okay, we need more warehouse space. And so to get more warehouse space, we got to move the diner. So the building that we're in had a bunch of empty space. So we talked to the landlord and decided to take a storefront, which happens to be right beside Thrift It. And it was a restaurant, so it was already semi set up for doing what we needed to do. So we just moved our diner out of the back of the warehouse and gave it a storefront. And Kayla made a very funky, cool thrift store. We couldn't have a dumpy restaurant beside that, so I had to compete with what was next door. I wanted if people are going to go into Thrift It and then come in here for a coffee, that they feel like they're walking into another place that you might see downtown. It's quirky, it's whatever. The theme in the restaurant is motorcycles because I'm a biker. So we've got all kinds of motorcycle stuff all over the walls and decorations and art and all of that stuff. The whole concept is you pay what you can. So we went from going just Tuesday and Thursday evenings for those people. We're now open right now, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday from 10 to 5. And people come in, and it doesn't exclude anybody because you pay what you can. If somebody comes in and says, I can't pay anything, that's fine. You still get to eat. We've had people come in and say, look, I want a coffee and a burger, but I only have $3. That's fine. But again, we didn't want them to feel like they were walking into a soup kitchen kind of feel. We want them to feel like they're walking into a restaurant that anybody would walk into. One of the things that I've always focused on is I don't want to meet a need that somebody else is already meeting. When I see opportunities and I see new needs in the community, that's when I jump. I'm not going to recreate what somebody else is doing unless I think I can do it way better. And I tend to think that a lot. Kind of like the food bank, you know, we never expected it to become what it became. But as the need grew, we had to step up to meet the need. You know, as you learn that there are hundreds of families dealing with food insecurity in the West Island, you can't, in my mind, I can't just sit back and say, well, that sucks, and not try and do something about it, which is how we got started doing what we were doing. And it just continued to grow, being connected with all kinds of other food distributors and other organizations that help people in the Montreal area. And we all help each other because we all have a common goal, and there's a need out there. If we can't fix it with or help it with what we've already got, then we need to grow. We need to build onto it. So that's what we do. If you want to get into helping your community, find a place to volunteer and start out volunteering. I would just say, dive in and find a place to start. You know, you don't need to be an expert.
So joining me today to comment on Kayla and Kim Reid's story is Dr. Louise Hayes. And Louise is a clinical psychologist. She's an international acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, trainer and speaker. She's done research collaborating on interventions for adults and young people. And of course, she's an author. She's the past president of the Association for Contextual and Behavioral Sciences. And she's well recognized for her book, The Thriving Adolescent, the book where she really started to talk about the DNAV model that she'll talk more about today. She co-authored the bestsellers, Your Life, Your Way, and Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life for Teens. Her most recent book is What Makes You Stronger, and it's a book that's based in ACT, and it's about thriving in the face of change and uncertainty. So Louise is going to help us today dive deeper into Kayla and Kim's story using the DNAV model. That's really the basis of the book, What Makes You Stronger. Hopefully by the end of today, we'll have a much better understanding of how people respond optimally to change using some of Louise's ideas. So Louise, welcome to Hero Next Door.
Thank you, Marilyn. It's lovely to be here. And what a great story with Kim and Kayla.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed listening to it. Yeah. Maybe you could start. So I've alluded in your introduction to the DNAV model, and some of the people who listen to us will certainly know about ACT and maybe about that model, but maybe you can just elaborate for us with DNAV, what those things stand for. And then we'll go into how does that help us respond to change?
Sure. Okay. Well, the idea behind it is what we decided to do, myself and my co-author, Joseph Cherokee, is we began to look at the ways in which we can help people grow and change. So much of therapy work, it looks at the ways people are struggling with things, you know, maybe struggling with thoughts or struggling with experiences that they've had. And that's fine. But we also wanted to look at how do we help people grow? And we began looking at adolescents and then somehow ended up finding our way through to adults as well. because it makes sense. You know, adults are growing and our development is not just in the adolescent period. We continue to grow and gain new abilities and change all across our life. So we really wanted to put the spotlight on this. How do we help people think about, I want to do something different in my life, or I want this part to change? And this latest book, What Makes You Stronger, we started to write before the pandemic hit. And then, of course, everything changed. So it's about change and growth, really.
You must have felt like you were in kind of a very strange place as you're going through all this change and writing about change at the same time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I didn't answer your question about what the DNAV part stands for. So I'll say that very quickly. What we did is we looked at all of the abilities that a human has. So all of the behaviors that they can engage in, all of the things we can do and think and feel. And we kind of cut them up into 4 areas to make it easy to understand and easy for us as individuals to think about what we're doing in the world. So we call them your ability to give yourself advice. I'm going backwards because it's easier to give yourself advice. We call that your advisor. And that's how you think and talk to yourself. The N stands for noticing, your ability to notice what's happening inside you and to feel and to be embodied and to be a presence and to notice what's happening outside you, to notice the feel of a hug when someone hugs you. The discoverer is the ability to do things. Sometimes we call it the doer as well, the ability to test and try and do things in the world. And in the center is the V, which stands for value and vitality. And that is, I like it being in the center. That's like the center of our being, our heart, you know, the things that we care about and what we're here in the world for. And for most of us, that's love and connection. But then it builds out to other things that we care about. So it's just a way of looking at all of yourself as a human and thinking, how am I using each of these parts? And how can I use these parts in a way that help me grow?
As you were listening to Kim and to Kayla, did you pick out any examples of A, N, or D? Like, I know it goes forwards, but it also goes backwards, really, in the way.
Yeah, it does. It does. Well, yes, I did. So the first thing that I noticed that's the most important is you can really hear it, particularly in Kim, where he talked about the kind of person he is. That's what he values. And you could hear him talk about things like serving people, his spirituality, being a Christian, his love of music, his love of kids and young people, the drop-in centre, and his love of biking as well. But so you could hear in Kim is all of these passions that we would call value. And those, you could hear the way the actions that he had taken in the world really expanded what he cares about, expanded his values. And that's kind of what we want to look at as well. So that was really clear in Kim. It was clear in Kayla too, but with Kim, all those extra years of experience made it pretty clear that there's a huge valued center for him. And with Kayla, you could hear, you could tell though, well, I know their daughter and father, but Kayla, you could hear the pieces that were similar. Kayla was creative and loved art, but she also had this passion for helping people and connecting people. So there was kind of a synergy in the way they cared about things. That's the values piece. Yeah.
I think one of the things that struck me as I heard their story too was how much they noticed the world around them. I mean, so originally the old woman came to them and said, you know, can you help me with this food bank, which they ended up kind of running on their own. But it just kept growing and growing. And oh, there's a need here. Oh, these people, you know, they don't just need a place to go. They need food to eat. Oh, and we could have a cafe. And wouldn't it be cool if the cafe was as funky as our thrift store? I mean, funky and thrift store are not the things that I think are not two words I often think of going together, but clearly they had a real vision. But a lot of this was anchored in noticing what was going on in the world around them.
Absolutely, absolutely. Their ability to notice themselves and other people in the world is really one of their extraordinary abilities. And when we do work with DNAV, I think the noticing piece is perhaps the piece that I personally think is the most important. Not that any part of us is more important than another part. But what we can do is, you know, you can notice, they noticed the struggle that other people were having. They, that would have created in them a sense of distress, maybe a sense of sadness or a sense of frustration, and their ability to be able to open up to that experience and to not turn away is really one of the most important parts that I think that we need to do. Because as humans, and the way we learn in our cultures is often when we have feelings we don't like sadness or distress at someone else being impoverished or not having food, the easiest thing for us to do is to close that emotion down and to turn away and just distract ourselves and to not do anything about it. They were able to stay with that and to stay with the feeling that you would have of, I'm too small to make a difference. I can't do anything here. It's too big of a problem. How could little me help poor people in all of the city of Montreal or all of Canada? But their ability was to stay there, to be present with that feeling and then to use it. It's really, really interesting.
Yes. It's a very important quality to be able to stay in that place and fight with that idea that what I do is going to be so small and so insignificant, and just move ahead. I think toward the end, it's Kim who says something about, how could I not do something? You know, the sense that you have to, the doer part has to come in at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And that part we call the discoverer. And I'd really like to talk about the discoverer that I saw inside Kim and Kayla, because we call it the discoverer, and it's just a word that helps us describe the way we can find new ways to do things, or not. We can just continue to stay in our comfort zone and do the same thing over and over. So in the face of, let's say, the distress that they saw in their community, they could have just continued to turn away and do the same thing that you always do. But they were both driven by this values-based sense of, I want to do something. And what I most like about our ability to discover is that we don't know what we can do until we take that little step. Right? And I heard that in both Kim and Kayla. Kim said things like, I just knew there was a need and I thought, well, I'll just do one thing. And he said, I'll just dive in and see what happens. And that's the thing that I try to help the people that I serve do too. I just said, let's just dive in and do one thing. And that one thing, your advisor, your self-talk will be saying, this is not going to work. This is not going to happen. Nothing's going to sort out right. But just do that first little thing and see what happens. And with Kim, you saw the first thing was a music store because he wanted CDs to be at a reasonable price. And then he dived in and did the food bank because he saw that. And then it just spiraled on. And if you asked him today, did he think back then that any of that stuff was going to unfold? There's every chance he'd say no. So discovery is all about trying and not and being able to hold this part of our mind that says it won't work, you're too small, and being able to step in and try something. And if I could talk about Kayla, because you can see it in Kayla too. COVID happened. She'd done her teacher's degree in art, and COVID happened, and she's like, well, I care about what's happening and I want to do something. So I'll do a thrift store. Right. With no concept of what that's going to mean. I'll just do something. We'll just find a way to do a thrift store. And then she brings her creativity and her art to it and decorates it and does it interesting. And then she gets on Instagram and TikTok, and each step leads to another step. And that's what I think is probably one of the really key things that we can think about is you don't know what you're capable of. And your mind will often tell you that you're not capable of things, or the things you think about are too hard, or the problem is too big.
Is that typical in either research that you know about, or research you've done, or your own workshops, your own work with clients on this? Is it typical that that contact with the values and the vitality takes you through that DNA sequence, I don't know, more easily, more to a better result? Can you just talk a little bit about what the benefits you see are?
Absolutely. I think the benefits of understanding value, and we call it value and vitality. We split it in two. So vitality is the energy that you have in the moment, in the day, and value is more of a long-term sense of a heartfelt, I care about this, this matters to me. And the research on people who are able to connect with that experience, even able to think about this matters to me without doing anything, just being able to think about this matters to me. Even having people do that shows changes in all sorts of outcomes. For example, there's some old studies of Sherman and Cohen with high school kids, where they asked high school kids to write down what they care about. And just the very act of writing down what matters to them with some instructions, but writing down what matters to them had flow-on effects to their grades and their school outcomes. And we know this in lots and lots of areas. And we even know it with our stories. Kim and Kayla's story, you can hear it. The ability to do something that you care about and to think about it and take that first step is almost the story that's inside all of our stories, our heroes' stories, our stories of triumph against tragedy. It's all based on what I care about.
I think sometimes we named ourselves the hero next door with the idea that we want to bring in both what's heroic and wonderful, but also to emphasize that these are just ordinary people who are doing these things. These are not movie stars or great athletes or politicians, people with power. They're just folk. I think one of the things that happens, and I've had this reaction sometimes when we approach people to say, can we tell your story as a hero story? And they'll say, I'm not a hero. You can't call me that. I'm just an ordinary person. But that contact that you're talking about with their own values and their own vitality allows them to do things that are quite extraordinary sometimes.
Absolutely. And what you're hearing there when someone says, I'm not a hero, you're hearing their advisor, right? Which is just another word. It's just another word for how we tell ourselves what to do, right? Or thinking, you might loosely call it that. It's a bit more complicated, but it's basically how you tell yourself what to do. And so as soon as you hear someone say, oh, I'm not a hero, I can't do that, or that's them kind of listening to the voice inside themselves, which is often about protecting you and keeping you safe. But it can also be about stopping you from taking risks. We face the challenge. We want to take a few risks, but we want to also give ourselves advice that's useful. We need to balance that, and it's tricky.
As I was reading What Makes You Stronger, and the parts about it that have to do with the advisor, I realized, the advisor can be a good thing, but sometimes you really don't want to trust that advisor. That protective instinct that is in your advisor is going to keep you from changing.
That's right. Sometimes keep you from changing, and sometimes keep you from trying new things and growing, because it's all about prediction. And sometimes the easiest way to think about what behavior is like, or this thought process is like, I think about the pandemic. So if you think of the beginning of the pandemic, our advisors were like on fire. I was telling myself, this is going to be terrible. It's never going to finish. The world is going to end.
You have to see the picture of me washing my groceries, wiping them down with disinfectant.
I would love to see that picture. I really would love it. I'll have a look at it. It's probably on Insta where everything goes. What did you predict? Like what did you predict when the pandemic started? What was your advisor telling you?
Be safe, be safe, be safe, me and my loved ones, and like huddle in, don't go anywhere, don't do anything, take no risks at all.
Yeah. And that's really useful, right? But sometimes it's too much focused on be safe. It'll be terrible.
Yeah.
And so even across our own lives, when I think back at the things that I have done or experienced in my life, and I have been very fortunate, and I acknowledge that. But the things that have happened to me, if you had have asked me 20 years ago, would I be sitting here on a podcast talking to you? I would have gone, no way. Right?
Yeah.
And just so people have a bit of context to me saying that, I came from a family that was very impoverished, and we had lots of disadvantage. And I ended up growing up in a single parent home with my father who's an alcoholic and committed suicide. And if you had have said to me, what's going to happen in the future? My advisor would have not predicted this.
Yes. You would probably have chosen a much safer path for yourself.
Yes, yes. And so I think that happens in big ways and in small, from washing your groceries to how is my life going to turn out? And it's a really useful part of us, but we just need to moderate it and not give it all the power. Because your ability to value and care about things, and Kim and Kayla's ability to notice other people in their community,
Right.
and then this discover a piece, their ability to go, well, I'm just going to try something. That's how we grow. I'm just going to try something.
Yeah.
And
there's so much research about noticing on the level of the research on meditation and the beneficial effects of meditation and all kinds of awareness practices like meditation. How much do you see your noticer in the DNA model being like the awareness that comes with meditation?
Oh, I think it's a part of it and essential. I don't think everyone has to meditate.
Oh, no, neither do I.
No, but I don't think everyone has to meditate, but we all need to find ways to be here and to be able to notice what's happening around us and to notice what's happening inside and to not turn away. There really is, we're afraid of what's happening inside us. Meditation helps us be able to have all that experience and not have to run away. And I think it's very easy to be afraid of how you feel, with a caveat on people who have significant trauma. That's an area where getting some help is a really good thing to do. But for most of us, finding a way to open up and have our feelings, they're messages that can be so powerful. Meditation's good. So is walking. And so is Kim's riding his bike. I bet that's a form of meditation for Kim. And for Kayla, doing her artwork, being creative, all of
dressing
those.
for customers. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so too. I want to move our conversation, if I can, in the direction of kind of the how-to of this. I know you work as a psychologist. I know you work in groups of various kinds. You've worked with teens, you work with adults. Can you talk to me a little bit about, let's imagine that I want to be a bit more heroic in my life. I want to move more into the doing part. I want to take those values that I kind of know about, but don't pay that much attention. I want to add vitality to them. What have you learned about the ways that are useful, helpful to do that?
Okay. Well, let's start with the small ways that are useful.
Sure.
Because I think starting small is actually where we all need to be, not these grand ideas. The smallest thing can be being able to pause in a moment and think about what's the most important thing right now. And allow yourself to think about that. Like, what is the most important thing to me in this very moment? And that ability to pause, I think, is the starting place. Whether it's in a relationship, when you're having a tussle with your partner over who loaded the dishwasher and who didn't, and to be able to pause and think, well, what's the most important thing to me here?
Mhm.
Or whether it's, and it's usually not the dishes, you know, or whether it's, you know, yeah, it's just the dishes are just the byproduct, or whether it's pausing and just, you know, beginning your day and thinking, how do I want to be today in the world? What's the
Mhm.
most important thing today? So I think starting small and being able to pause is really useful. What I find the most fascinating about us as humans is that most of us will not let ourselves think about what we really care about. And we won't let ourselves think about what we care about because you watch this little tricky thing. Thinking about what you care about, just thinking about it with no one else knowing,
Mhm.
allows yourself to say, but you're not going to do it. You won't do that. You'll fail again. You're too scared. You won't try. It won't work out. People will laugh at you. And so that's all going on inside our head. No one even sees it. But sometimes just following that path, we close down the very thing that matters the most to us. And no one even knows it. It's all in your head.
Mhm. Does it help to bring it out, to say it out loud, to say it to somebody else?
It does, of course it does. But saying it out loud makes it real,
Yes.
right? There's a tricky thing there. If I say to
Yes.
you or you say to me, hey, I care about this, then that makes it real. And the risk of failure goes up. The risk of being a failure goes up. The risk of having to do something about it goes up.
I
Like
think
when
it's
Kim
more that, the risk of having to do something about it. Now I'm not exactly accountable, but now I've said it to somebody. Now, as you said a moment ago, it's more real. What am I going to do now?
That's right.
Which is its value.
That's right. And so inside out, so that it starts with inside, being able to pause, think about actually, what is the most important thing for me to do today? What do I really care about? And or what's the most important thing to me when I'm in the fight with my son or my partner over the dishes? Being able to pause and take that in, and then and then in a bigger picture, starting to think about, how do I want to make some decisions and do some things that I care about? And from thinking, then being able to say it out loud to yourself. Doesn't have to be anybody else, but say it out loud to yourself. Like maybe Kim said out loud, I'm going to do something about, helping people find some food security. And just saying it out loud, if you're a witness to yourself, then you start to think, oh, I better do something about this. And then other people will hear you. And of course, other people can be judgmental if you say it to them. Other people can say, oh, you're always full of big ideas and they never follow, or whatever kind of criticisms that we take on board. But being able to then try something with all of that negativity and pressure, and then being able to go, well, I'll just do something small and see what happens.
We've been doing Hero Next Door interviews for Instagram for a while now, and we often ask people, so if somebody wanted to do something like what you do, or they wanted to get involved, what would you say to them? It's amazing to me how many people say, just do something, just start, just, take a step. And that advice seems to be very similar to what you're saying.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is just take a step, and take that step not having to believe it. Like every time I do something new, my advisor's saying, oh, this won't work out. It'll be terrible. You're not smart enough to do that, or you're not social enough to do that, or you're too quiet to do that. But just do the little tiny thing. And the biggest thing that I think we tell ourselves is this little thing is not important. This is only a little step. Like, let's say it was Kim or Kayla just gathering food, for their food security program, just gathering food. They might think, well, this is not going to help very many people. We've got 3 bags of food. This is not going to help very many people at all. But there's something in our patterns, that as soon as we do that first little tiny thing, then maybe the next week they went, oh, we'll take 6 bags of food. Right. And it kind of is like that, is we almost need to suspend belief and try something and let the world kind of give us some feedback. Like perhaps maybe Kim and Kayla are their first few bags of food. At the end of that day, they went, oh, that felt pretty good. Right?
Yeah.
And had that little bit of extra confidence to do the next thing.
The way that I think about what you're saying right now is also that if the thing that I'm doing really does relate to what I value. So if I care about people who haven't got enough to eat, and I deliver 3 bags of food to people who don't have enough to eat, I feel good about that. I did something that I value, even if it was small. And yes, I can have an advisor that says all the things that you just talked about, but
that's not important. As in, that's what your advisors say. That's not important. There's still 7 million people who don't have food.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, if we just sort of wait in that moment, the pause that you talked about before, I think that's a really important idea. That pause also at that point allows us to say, no, it's not everything. It's very small, but it is what I value. Like I'm being my best me as I do this.
Yeah. And it is something. And just as you were talking, it always makes me think of the poet Mary Oliver, which many people would know, I guess, in the US and perhaps Canada and places that you go to. What will you do with your one wild and precious life? And I think being able to hold that sensibility, what will you do with your one wild and precious life? And not make it big. It doesn't mean you have to be the hero. It means do that small thing and see where that small thing leads to another small thing and then another small thing.
See if it's enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I really hope that people who are listening today can use some of this advice to help themselves be more in contact with those values that vitalize them and become more responsive to all the changes that we all face.
I hope so too. If I could add one more thing, I think it's
Yes.
what struck me that was really interesting with Kim and Kayla, and it's actually the essential part of the work that we do inside DNAV, is to rest it in a context of their social world. And they have the ability to think about other people and to make their lives about connecting with other people. And I think we spend in our individualistic cultures way too much time on the individual and not enough time on what it actually means to be able to connect with others and to collaborate and help others. And you can hear it driving them in a good way. So I think that's the last thing that I'd like to look is connecting with others is what we wake up for.
That's a lovely thought to end with. Thank you so much for being here with us today and commenting on Kim and Kayla's story. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, thanks for allowing me to. And congratulations to Kim and Kayla for the work that they're doing and for every other hero who does work that we don't know about.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Hero Next Door. I hope the words of our heroes, Kayla and Kim Reid, and the thoughts of our expert, Dr. Louise Hayes, have given you ideas that help you and the people you help to navigate change using most important values. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to our Hero Next Door on your podcast channel or on YouTube. And join us again soon for stories of heroes and expert commentary about how to live your values.